It's time for another episode of Gospel Preaching Live, brought to you by the Kearney Church of Christ, which meets at 406 North Clark in Kearney, Missouri. Make plans to come out and visit the brethren, who look forward to seeing you. And now the host of Gospel Preaching Live, Richard Dodson.
96 degrees here in Smithville, Missouri, where I live. It's not too far from the Kearney town where I preach, Kearney Church of Christ. We're about 15 minutes away. It's kind of a sister city, but so I'm over here in Smithville, 96 degrees. Boy, that's just warm. And if anyone who ever lived in the Midwest realizes not only is it hot, but it's very humid. We got a lot of humidity here. Probably nothing to compare with living in Houston, but boy, let me tell you something. It's tough. So living this time of year, end of July, 1st August, yeah, it's that time of year. It's hot. So, I mean, good thing for us, at least for me anyway. I know I'm in air conditioning and I'm ready to bring you a gospel message. Hopefully you've had your dinner this evening and you're going to be able to sit back and enjoy this dinner. If you have any, enjoy this dinner, if you're going to be able to enjoy this sermon. I can't remember what I'm going to say. Needless to say, if you have any questions or comments, you can call 816-686-9517. That's 816-686-9517. And you can text me, call, whatever you need to do to communicate with me, whatever your need may be, question, comment, whatever it may be. Or you can go to and email me at gospelpreachinglive@gmail.com. That's gospelpreachinglive@gmail.com. Be sure to drop me an email if you'd like, or if you're on Facebook and YouTube, just go ahead and put it in the comments section. If you're watching from outside the United States, then leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. I like hearing from all the places where the message I see is going out. So please do that. If you like the message, if you appreciate it, you think it's something that needs to be shared, then do that as well. Let's just get this message out to everybody. So needless to say, we're going to go ahead and go into our lesson this evening. Hopefully, as I said before, you'll find it beneficial. And we're going to talk this evening about what's on TV tonight. I guess that's what I'm competing with, aren't I? Here it is, 7 o'clock Central Time here in the Midwest. So that's when good TV shows, if there's any good TV shows out there, that's when they come on the dial. And I want to talk to you about that because I think that is a very serious problem in our country today. Of course, I'm not aware in other countries, but I'm sure it's the same way. But in our country, I know for a fact for Christians, this is a very serious thing, especially if you have children. Now, those of you who are younger, I want you to take a real close look at this television set because that is like the TV I grew up with. In fact, my first TV that my family had wasn't even color. It was black and white. Can you imagine that? Watching television in black and white, but that's exactly what I did. And not only was that the television set, and, it wasn't that big a screen, but if we wanted to turn the channel, we had to get up and go to the TV and change the dial. There's a dial. Let me go back. There's a dial right here. You can see my little mouse cursor. There's a dial right there that you would flip to turn the channel. And of course, that didn't happen that often because there was only 4 channels, well, 5 counting the local. There was a local station for me. So I guess you could say there was 5, but the main ones was NBC, CBS, ABC, and then the public broadcasting network. That's all it was on. And of course, for me, there was channel 41 is what the number was, but that was a local station. They just showed local things. But and here's the weird part. Not only is that the only selection you had, around midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, sometime around then, they all went off the air. They played the national anthem and then they shut down. And all you saw was this little target screen with there was usually an Indian in the middle of it, and that's all you would see. And it's hard to imagine because television stations now, they're on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there's a whole lot more than what we see than when I was a child. I mean, there's just all kinds of television shows that can't even number them. But there's a difference between the shows of today and the shows of yesterday. With anything that's good, like the internet, good things can be done with it. And early on, the TV, there were some good things that happened. I actually seen this in 1969. Neil Armstrong, when a man landed on the moon, and they televised that, and that was a big deal, not just in my house, everybody's houses, and it was historic, and it was just mind boggling. And there was a broadcaster who broadcast the news, Walter Cronkite. He's right here in the middle. You know, believe it or not, everybody trusted him. He was like the main guy for giving the news, at least the most popular. Everybody believed in him, and it was an era where it doesn't seem like the press back then was. I mean, they were more focused on delivering the actual news than instead of commentaries or trying to promote some type of agenda that they may have. On Saturday mornings, we had cartoons. That was my day to watch cartoons. Saturday mornings, all the kids were out of school, and Looney Tunes was it. You always wanted to watch Looney Tunes. Shows like Leave It to Beaver were very, very popular when I was a child. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be popular today, but there was nothing sinful that I ever saw in Leave It to Beaver. Sports was also big early on. And it was neat being able to watch sports on television. My favorite children's show was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And that was good TV. All these things were good. There was nothing wrong with it. You couldn't get addicted to it because it wasn't on very long. Like I said, they went off the air at a certain time of day, but at least there was things that we could watch and be entertained by. But now, we pretty much carry our televisions with us. I know a lot of people have TVs in their house, but they also have it in their phones. And I used to, for a few years, not very long ago, I drove a bus up at the airport, and it just amazed me. I always tried to figure out there ought to be a way in which I could preach to these people through their phones. And I guess I found a way. But everybody that got on the bus, and sometimes I'd have as many as 35, 40 people, they'd get off an airplane, and my job was to take them to the parking lot. And they'd pull their phones out, and they'd look just like these people. I mean, there'd be 35, 40 people had their phones out, and they were all looking at it. And they were missing out on conversations with one another, but that's what they did. And so they're looking either for information, they're looking to be entertained, they're looking for something. And it's a 24-hour industry. Now, there is a monitoring board who tries to rate certain things so that parents can have an idea if something's good for their children or not. It's called the TV Parental Guidelines Monitoring Board. And, you can look this up and study on it if you want, but these, as far as I know, these aren't Christians. But they have their website is www.tvguidelines.org, where you can study up on that. But you need to remember these are not Christians who are setting the ratings for these. These are most likely worldly people who have not been trained as Christians have in what is right from wrong. Now, why do I say all that? Well, because we're going to talk about that tonight. When you're spending a lot of time watching television, and I mean either through the internet, on Facebook, YouTube, that's what I'm calling television, computers, whether it's your TVs in the house or even a gaming system. When you're doing all those things, that's your companion, and you're spending an awfully amount of your time with them. Now, when it comes to ranking things, 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 1 through 5. This is a part of the scripture that deals with a brother taking his brother to court. And I want to read this because there's a point here that I think we can apply to who makes the rankings on our television shows. He says, when one of you has a grievance against another, does he dare go to law before the unrighteous instead of the saints? Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to try trivial cases? Do you not know that we are to judge angels? How much more then matters pertaining to this life? And he says, so if you have such cases, why do you lay them before those who have no standing in the church? I say this to your shame. Can it be that there is no one among you wise enough to settle a dispute between the brothers? And what he is saying is that, look, guys, you should be better equipped to make a determination what's right or wrong than this unrighteous judge. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You should be able to make a determination. And when it comes to making a determination on what's right to watch on television, you should be the one who has trained yourself to be able to make such determinations, not those who are worldly. Those who are righteous should be able to make that determination. In Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 14, this was a passage that talked about those who should be teachers, but because they're not yet, they still needed the milk of the gospel. And then he, compares that to the solid food of the gospel. He said solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by constant practice to distinguish good from evil. And that's what we're talking about. You should be able to distinguish good from evil. And how do you do that? Well, because you have been making that determination based on your knowledge of the scriptures. The scriptures teach you, and then you can sit down and make a determination on what's fit to watch on television, or what game is fit to play, or what's good to watch on the computer. All those things you should be, the Lord's given you, he's equipped you to make that determination. Before you trust in man's ratings, you got to keep something in mind. And this is the danger. Television programming is designed to make money. They want a lot of viewers. And so they're going to try to make the shows appealing as they can to the largest amount of people. And unfortunately, the largest amount of people in this world are lost. They are on that wide road that leads to destruction. And so they're going to design shows that are worldly. You're going to have to recognize that going in. More than likely, if you see a new TV show coming out that you're excited about, there's a 99% chance it's very worldly and you shouldn't be watching it. But let's go ahead and get into the lesson. That's something you're going to have to recognize, and you're going to have to equip yourself to be able to make those determinations on what's good and what isn't good. Now, why is that? Well, because we're going to talk about 3 points tonight. Christians can fall away. And what's on TV, the TV can lead you astray. Christians are going to have to protect their hearts or they will fall away. And we cannot allow ourselves to be entertained. We should not be entertained by evil, which a lot of times that's what's on TV is evil. You see a lot of murder and fornication, adultery, all these kind of things. People get entertained by this. We got to be careful about that. So let's talk about the first one. Let's just recognize very quickly that Christians can fall away. We'll look at 2 Peter 2, verses 20 through 22, Revelation 2, verse 4 through 5, Hosea 4 and verse 6, Jeremiah 6 and verse 15. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 20 through 22, Peter says, if after, and he's talking about Christians, if after they have escaped the defilements of the world through the knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, they are again entangled in them and overcome. See, he's talking about those who've fallen away. The last state has become worse for them than the first. So we can see then that it's very possible for a Christian to fall away. And he even, he concludes this scripture by saying he calls this, the dog returns to its own vomit, and the sow after washing herself returns to wallow in the mire. That's what he's comparing it to for a Christian to fall away. And listen, when you're playing with fire like that by watching shows you shouldn't be watching, that can be a description of you if you fall away. In Revelation chapter 2, verse 4 and 5, the church at Ephesus had abandoned their first love. And he tells them that. He reminds them, you have it, or tells them, informs them, you've abandoned your first love. And then he tells them that they had fallen and they need to repent. And so, likewise, that just informs us that it's very possible that we can fall away. And we got to be very, very careful about that. Hosea 4 and verse 6, a couple of passages that pertain to the Israelites. This one here is for the Israelites. The next one we're going to talk about is the one that's in Jerusalem. They're Israelites as well, but the nation of Israel. But in Hosea 4 and verse 6, he says, my people, the Lord does through Hosea, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Well, if they were destroyed, that means they had fallen, right? They're no longer sound in the faith. And he says, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge because you have rejected knowledge. And he says, I reject you from being a priest to me. And so we understand that that's what happened to the Israelites. And then speaking to, he calls them the tribe of Judah, Benjamin in Jeremiah 6, but he's talking to those in Jerusalem. He says, were they ashamed when they had committed abomination? He's talking about sin. No, they were not at all ashamed. They did not know how to blush. Think about that. They didn't even know how to blush. They reached the point where they couldn't be ashamed by sin. So can a Christian fall away? Yes. And this isn't an extensive lesson on that. I'm just using a few scriptures just to bring it to your attention that it's a very, very dangerous thing. We have to be careful of. We can fall away. We have to take heed lest we fall. And so let's go on to our next point. And we're going to talk about protecting our hearts. And I hope you all watched Berean Spirits. It's a show that was on earlier today. It's still there. You can go to the carneychurch.com website, click on the Berean Spirits YouTube channel, Carney's Facebook channel or YouTube channel. It doesn't matter. But catch the latest episode of Berean Spirits. And Josh had some good things to say about protecting our hearts. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that because I think that's not what is happening when Christians are watching these horrible things on TV. We're going to look at 1 Peter 5, verse 8 and 9, 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 3, 2 Timothy 2 and verse 22, Mark 7, 21 through 23, Matthew 5, verse 28, and Philippians chapter 4 and verse 8. Now, we've already talked about how dangerous it is, how we can fall away. But now we're going to have to recognize that God also states we have an adversary. We're at war. 1 Peter 5, verse 8 and 9. Peter says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Be watchful. In other words, you need to be careful. Your adversary, the devil, there's your adversary. He prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Resist him firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. He's your adversary, and he's looking whom he may devour. So you need to be on the watch for that instead of just harmlessly turning on the TV and finding something to watch. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 3, Paul says, I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve, that's the devil, your adversary, as the serpent deceived Eve, and that's the key word, deceived. He deceived Eve by his cunning. Your thoughts will be led astray from a sincere and pure devotion to Christ. The Lord requires that pure devotion. And purity is so important. But we can be deceived. It deceived Eve, and the devil can lead you astray as well. He's going to get into your thoughts, and he's going to cause you to think things that no sober-minded Christian would want to think about. And he can do that through the TV. And that's what we got to be very, very careful about. 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 22, Timothy was exhorted by Paul to flee youthful passions and pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace, along with all those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. Again, we have to protect that heart because that is what the Lord requires. And it's very hard to maintain a pure heart while being entertained by evil. In Mark chapter 7 and verses 21 through 23, Jesus makes this point for from within, out of the heart of man comes evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and they defile a person. All these things come from within. And so if you're having any thoughts that would be categorized by some of these things that are mentioned here, these evil thoughts, then maybe your adversary, the devil, put them there. Maybe you have not protected your heart like you should. You know, we have to be very careful about that. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 28, Jesus gave an example of this in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, whoever looks, but I say to you that everyone who looks to a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, I just use this. We can put any sin here, any sin. But the Lord used this lustful intent. We're going to use it too, because it does apply. In today's world, what do we see? We see so much selling of sex. That's what the advertisers want. They know it sells. And so they're putting sex in the TV shows and on the advertising. And what does that create? That creates lust. And so we understand, though, if that lust happens, guess what? Then you've already violated that pure heart. And that's what Jesus is. He's calling it. This is an evil thought. 1 Corinthians 6:18 says, flee from sexual immorality. And so we need to make sure that we are not watching and being entertained by adultery, by fornication, by any sin for that matter. But to stick with Jesus's example here, let's just say this. We need to make sure we turn the channel when adultery or fornication or things that are going to cause someone to lust are on the screen. Immodest apparel, these kind of things we should not be watching. We shouldn't be entertained by those. Why? Because we have to protect our heart. If we don't protect our heart, then we've given up the castle. Because those evil thoughts are going to get in, and guess what? If the evil thoughts are in there, they're coming out. You're going to manifest it somehow, some way. But it doesn't matter because you've already violated the heart. So we're going to have to be very sober-minded. We're going to have to take it serious. We're going to have to understand it's our responsibility to make sure that we protect that heart. The Lord demands a pure heart. Now, in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, Paul gives us instructions on how we can protect that heart. He said, finally, brothers, whatever's true, whatever's honorable, whatever's just, whatever's pure, whatever's lovely, whatever's commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Think about that. Now, think about what he just said. I want you to consider your favorite TV show. All right. If you're supposed to be thinking about these things, are those things on your favorite TV show? Are they true? Are they honorable? Are they just? Is it pure? Is it lovely? Is it commendable? Is there excellence? Is it worthy of praise? If it's not, turn it off, because you are letting the devil, your adversary, attack the heart. You need to be thinking about those good things. Now, that's one reason I do these shows on the internet. It gives people an alternative. They can sit there and look at my ugly face on the screen and at least hear some joyous in that. They can look at me and think, wow, that old ugly guy's going to heaven. Why can't I go to heaven? All right. Our last point is Christians should not be entertained by evil. Oh, that's so important. That is so important. We should not be entertained by evil. We're going to look at Isaiah 5:20, 1 John chapter 2 and verse 15, Romans 1 verse 32, Ephesians 5:11 and 12, and then 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 33. Then the lesson will be yours. Okay, Isaiah 5 and verse 20. Isaiah says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Well, if you're watching a TV show that's nothing but evil and you're enjoying it, and you're saying, wow, this is a great show, are you not calling evil good? I mean, I would think that would be the case. And 1 John verse 2 and verse 15 says, do not love the world or the things that are in the world. Well, those TV shows are in the world, and many of them, most of them are very, very worldly. And so he says, don't love them or the things that are in the world. That's pretty well clear. And then he says, if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Well, that's scary. For all that's in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. Well, we got to be careful about that. Very, very careful. Because again, most of these TV shows are worldly. In Romans chapter 1 and verse 32, when Paul was recounting some of the evil things that people did when they did not like to retain God and their knowledge, it says, though they knew God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. Well, that's exactly what we're doing when we're saying, hey, this is a great show and it's nothing but evil. Think about that. We're giving approval to those who practice them. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 11 and 12, it says, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness. Take no part. I mean, I think that means don't watch it on TV. It says, but expose them. In other words, get up there and say, hey, this is sin. He says it is shameful even to speak of the things they do in secret. It's shameful. And we're being entertained by it. Now, if you have any questions on some show that you watch, get out a piece of paper and sit down in front of that show and just start writing down the sins that you see. I would bet you would be shocked in 5 minutes how many sins come across. And that is what you are allowing yourself to be attacked by. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 33, Paul said, do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. You know that verse. Your mom and dad probably quoted that to you all the time. You know, evil companions corrupt good morals. You've heard that. Well, that comes right from the Bible. You will be corrupted when you are watching these shows. Those things become your companion. And you need to be careful about that. All right, so we'll close the lesson. What's on TV tonight? Well, we talked about 3 things. We can fall away, so we got to be careful. We got to be sober-minded. We need to protect our hearts because the devil's out there and he is constantly on the attack. And he is shooting arrow after arrow, trying to get into that pure heart of yours. And we should not, we realize that we should not be entertained by evil. One more point. You may think, well, what can I do? Well, you know what? God does not hate entertainment. And if you look for it, you can find entertainment. Now, it may be older shows, but there's some newer ones. There are good shows out there if you look for it, but you're going to have to look for it to find it. I admit that there's a small amount of people who are wanting such entertainment, but if you look for it, you will find it and you can find good entertainment. The Lord has provided. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15 and 16 says, look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Make the most of your opportunity. You got a chance to serve God and go to heaven. Take advantage of that. All right, the lesson's yours. I hope it's been beneficial to you. If you're ever in the Kearney, Missouri area, please come and meet us at the Kearney Church of Christ. We are at 406 North Clark, We meet Sunday mornings at 9:30 for Bible study, 10:30 for worship. And we'd love to see you. Be sure to come and visit with us. If you are in the Kearney area and you want to hear more lessons like this, you can tune every Sunday morning to 102.7 FM KPGZ. That's our hometown radio station, and you'll hear me preach a lesson. Again, every Sunday morning at 7. If you're outside the Kearney area, you can stream it on your mobile device. As I mentioned before, Berean Spirits comes on every Thursday at 10 o'clock live, and you can take part by making comments on Facebook and YouTube. But we try to study the Bible like the Bereans. We make some jokes. We have some fun, but it's a Bible study is exactly what it is. And we'd sure like to invite you to attend. You can watch it by going to, again, our Kearney Church website and clicking on the Berean Spirits YouTube page or Kearney Church's Facebook and YouTube page. You just got to look around a little bit. If you go to the Berean Spirits one, the latest show should be right there at front. So, okay, that's all I have for you this evening. Remember, our next episode will be this Sunday, Lord willing, at 6 p.m. Central Time. Until then, remember, this is the day the Lord has made. Let's rejoice in it and be glad.
This has been Gospel Preaching Live. Join us each week as truth is taught, faith is examined, and beliefs are challenged. Be sure and hit the like button so you can be notified of future episodes. And to watch past episodes, go to our website, kearneychurch.com. This has been a work of the Kearney Church of Christ.